Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between. This is going to be a very short episode of this podcast, Author Talks, partly because it's been a week. It's been a couple of weeks, actually, a quite extensive couple of weeks. My debut novel, Starborn Vendetta, is definitely scheduled for the fall from Ronan Weatherford, and the main thing that's been happening is discussions over the cover art, proper credits, getting the proofs done. This is going to be, relatively speaking, a tiny episode. I mean, I could do a bit of reading. That's entirely possible. Anyway, the main thing is that I will try and keep up the schedule. Just consistency, you know. But there's no guarantee. I might end up slipping 1 week, and you might end up going a whole week without any podcast updates from me. The second thing that I've been trying to do, experimenting with, is transforming my podcast into a video format. This is something that I have had no experience with previously. The first experiment seems to have gone well. There is a prospect of me being able to very, very thoroughly turn this into a more multimedia style. No guarantee I'll be able to... No guarantee I'll be able to do anything more consistent. Certainly not at the moment. The main thing I've been doing at the moment is... there's stuff at home that I needed to sort out. There was also the whole work thing. There's also the fact that my next project has finally been getting properly off the ground, and I've been really pushing forward with it. Which also means that some other things have ended up being neglected or left by the side of the road, metaphorically speaking. The other thing is, I am now on BlueSky, as Thomas Wrightson, again, but with Twitter, I still think of it as Twitter, even though it's now become a very X-rated platform. The main thing is that I am now on BlueSky. Many, many, many thanks to fellow author Sarah Ash for sending me an invite code, and I've been loving it. It's only been a couple of days, and I feel like I've gone back in time in terms of the stuff I've been able to do. Facebook's also become more productive as a platform, not only for business communications, but just getting my blog posts out there. Things are moving, and I don't know how long they will be going for in terms of different elements and aspects, but it's a transitionary time, a time where things are in flux. Things may or may not happen. It's definitely going to be a busy and potentially nerve-wracking time for me. Going forward, I will definitely be at BristolCon. I still don't know whether I'll be doing anything or just being there. I am planning to attend the Friday pre-event, attend Juliet McKenna's book launch, and who knows, I might read something, I might not. It's sort of entirely up in the air at this moment. Main thing is, I'll be there. Hopefully I will have a good time, and hopefully I will meet some of my colleagues and, yes, I don't mind calling them that, friends there. I do love Bristol. I think you need to be there to understand why, but I do love it so. And yes, I am going to read you a short story, as short as it can be. This is from Arthur Porges, and it's called The Fly, but yeah, it's not that fly, it's a very different fly. So, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you a short story, a piece from my anthology, The Best Science Fiction Stories. Enjoy. Shortly after noon, the man unslung his Geiger counter and placed it carefully upon a flat rock by a thick, inviting patch of grass. He listened to the faint, erratic background ticking for a moment, then snapped off the current. No point in running the battery down just to hear stray cosmic rays and residual radioactivity. So far he'd found nothing potent, not a single trace of workable ore. Squatting, he unpacked an ample lunch of hard-boiled eggs, bread, fruit, and a thermos of black coffee. He ate hungrily, but with the neat, crumbless manners of an outdoorsman, and when the last bite was gone, stretched out, braced his elbows to sip the remaining drops of coffee. It felt mighty good, he thought, to get off your feet after a 6-hour hike through rough country. As he lay there, savouring the strong brew, his gaze suddenly narrowed and became fixed. Right before his eye, artfully spun between 2 twigs and a small mossy boulder, a cunning snare for the unwary spread its threads of wet silver in a network of death. It was the instinctive creation of a master engineer, a near-perfect logarithmic spiral, stirring gently in a slight updraft. He studied it closely, tracing with growing interest the special cable attached only at the ends, that led from a silk cushion at the web's centre up to a crevice in the boulder. He knew that the mistress of this snare must be hidden there, crouching with one hind foot on her primitive telegraph wire and awaiting those welcome vibrations which meant a victim thrashing helplessly among the sticky threads. He turned his head, desiring a proper angle, and soon found it. Deep in the dark crevice, the spider's eyes formed a sinister, jewelled pattern. Yes, she was at home, patiently watching. It was all very efficient, and in a reflective mood, drowsy from his exertions and a full stomach, he pondered the small miracle before him. How a speck of protoplasm, a mere dot of white nerve tissue which was a spider's brain, had antenated the mind of Euclid by countless centuries. Spiders are an ancient race. Ages before man wrought wonders through his subtle abstractions of points and lines, a spiral not to be distinguished from this one winnowed the breezes of some prehistoric summer. Then he blinked, his attention once more sharpened. A glowing gem, glistening metallic blue, had planted itself squarely upon the web. As if manipulated by a conjurer, the blue bottle fly had appeared from nowhere. It was an exceptionally fine specimen, he decided, large, perfectly formed, and brilliantly rich in hue. He eyed the insect wonderingly. Where was the usual panic, the frantic struggling, the shrill, terrified buzzing? It rested there with an odd indifference to restraint that puzzled him. There was at least one reasonable explanation. The fly might be sick or dying, the prey of parasites. Fungi and the ubiquitous roundworms shattered the ranks of even the most fertile. So unnaturally still was this fly that the spider, wholly unaware of its feathery landing, dreamed on in her shaded lair. Then, as he watched, the blue bottle, stupidly perverse, gave a single sharp tug. Its powerful wings blurred for a moment, and a high-pitched buzz sounded. The man sighed, almost tempted to interfere. Not that it mattered how soon the fly betrayed itself. Eventually the spider would have made a routine inspection, and, unlike most people, he knew her for a staunch friend of man, a tireless killer of insect pests. It was not for him to steal her dinner and tear her web. Now, silent and swift, a pea on 8 hairy legs, agile legs, she glided over her swaying net. An age-old tragedy was about to be enacted, and the man waited with the pitying interest of the inevitable denouement. About an inch from her prey, the spider paused briefly, estimating the situation with diamond-bright, soulless eyes. The man knew what would follow. Utterly contemptuous of a mere fly, however large, lacking either sting or fangs, the spider would unhesitatingly close in, swathe the insect in silk, and drag it into her nest in the rock, where it would be drained at leisure. But instead of a fearless attack, the spider edged cautiously nearer. She seemed doubtful, even uneasy. The fly's strange passivity apparently worried her. He saw the needle-pointed mandibles working, ludicrously suggestive of a woman wringing her hands in agonized indecision. Reluctantly she crept forward. In a moment she would turn about, squirt a preliminary jet of silk over the blue bottle, and by dexterously rotating the fly with her hind legs, wrap it in a gleaming shroud. And so it appeared, for satisfied with a closer inspection, she forgot her fears and whirled, thrusting her spinnerets towards the motionless insect. Then the man saw a startling, an incredible thing. There was a metallic flash as a jointed, shining rod stabbed from the fly's head like some fantastic rapier. It licked out with lightning precision, pierced the spider's plump abdomen, and remained extended, forming a terrible link between them. He gulped, tense with disbelief. A bluebottle fly, a mere lapper of carrion, with an extensible, sucking proboscis? It was impossible. Its tongue is only an absorbing cushion designed for sponging up liquids. But then was this really a fly after all? Insects often mimic each other, and he was no longer familiar with such points. No, a blue bottle is unmistakable. Besides, this was a true fly, 2 wings and everything. Rusty or not, he knew that much. The spider had stiffened as the queer lance struck home. Now she was rigid, obviously paralyzed, and her swollen abdomen was contracting like a tiny fist as the fly sucked its juices through the slender, pulsating tube. He peered more closely, raising himself to his knees, longing for a lens. It seemed to his straining gaze as if that gruesome beak came not from the mouth region at all, but through a minute, hatch-like opening between the faceted eyes, with a nearly invisible square door ajar. But that was absurd. It must be the glare and... Ah! Flickering, the rod retracted. There was definitely no such opening now. Apparently the bright sun was playing tricks. The spider stood shriveled, a pitiful husk, still upright on her thin legs. One thing was certain, he must have this remarkable fly. If not a new species, it was surely very rare. Fortunately it was stuck fast in the web. Killing the spider could not help it. He knew the steely toughness of those elastic strands, each a tight helix filled with superbly tenacious gum. Very few insects, and those only among the strongest, ever tear free. He gingerly extended his thumb and forefinger. Easy now. He had to pull the fly loose without crushing it. Then he stopped, almost touching the insect, and staring hard. He was uneasy, a little frightened. A brightly glowing spot, brilliant even in the glaring sunlight, was throbbing on the very tip of the blue abdomen. A reedy, barely audible whine was coming from the trapped insect. He thought momentarily of fireflies, only to dismiss the notion with scorn for his own stupidity. Of course, a firefly is actually a beetle, and this thing was not that anyway. Excited, he reached forward again, but as his plucking fingers approached, the fly rose smoothly in a vertical ascent, lifting a pyramid of taut strands and tearing a gap in the web as easily as a flipped stone. The man was alert, however. His cupped hand, nervously swift, snapped over the insect, and he gave a satisfied grunt. But the captive buzzed in his grasp with a furious vitality that appalled him, and he yelped as a searing, slashing pain scalded the sensitive palm. Involuntarily he relaxed his grip. There was a streak of electric blue as his prize soared, glinting in the sun. For an instant he saw that odd glowworm tail light, a dazzling spark against the darker sky. Then nothing. He examined the wound, swearing bitterly. It was purple, and already little blisters were forming. There was no sign of a puncture. Evidently the creature had not used its lancet, but merely spurted venom, acid perhaps, on the skin. Certainly the injury felt very much like a bad burn. Damn and blast! He'd kicked away a real find, an insect probably new to science, and with a little more care he might have caught it. Stiff and vexed, he got sullenly to his feet and repacked the lunch kit. He reached for the Geiger counter, snapped on the current, took one step towards a distant rocky outcrop, and froze. The slight background noise had given way to a veritable roar, an electronic avalanche that could mean only one thing. He stood there, scrutinizing the grassy knoll and shaking his head in profound mystification. Frowning, he put down the counter. As he withdrew his hand, the frantic clatter quickly faded out. He waited, half stooped, a blank look in his eyes. Suddenly they lit with doubting, half-fearful comprehension. Cat-like, he stalked the clicking instrument, holding one arm outstretched, gradually advancing the blistered palm, and the Geiger counter raved anew. And with that, the story is concluded. When I first saw the title The Fly, I really thought that it was that, The Fly, because that is based on a short story, novella, if I forget which. But no, this is a different fly, and it is spooky. It's, well, I'm glad I was able to do something. Ladies and gentlemen, everyone in between, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the short story, and I hope that the updates weren't too confused. I shall, fingers crossed, be able to give you another episode in 2 weeks' time. Thank you, and see you soon. Or rather, listen, oh, what the heck. Bye for now.